Hi, True Crime Grapevine fans. It's me, Patty Lee. It is September 20th, Wednesday, here in the United States, around the Great Lakes area, which I'm from. And hey, I've been watching all the true crime interwebs today. And like every other weeknight, I'm here for you to tell you what I heard on the true crime grapevine, right? Like I heard it on the grapevine. Just like that girl in high school that always was listening to what everybody else was saying in the halls, in the bathroom, at lunch table. Yeah, that's me, only it's about true crime. And then at the end of the day, I tell you guys about it because I'm just like you. I want to know what's going on. And then after discussing some of the facts, I want to speculate a little bit. Some allegations and shade, perhaps. And if you'd like to do that too, you can like, subscribe, or not, whatever. You can comment. I'd love to hear more comments because I tell you guys what I think, but tell me what you think. So tonight we have 4 cases, so I better be quick if I'd like to keep this about under an hour. Grab something to drink, and here's to Wednesday being over. It's been busy this week. There was a solved crime, so we'll get to that. So let's get into it. First, corrections corner. The 1-year-old who passed away from the fentanyl poisoning at his Bronx daycare center. Yes, deadly daycare. That was last night's case that I talked about that because 2 of the 3 people involved were federally indicted after 2 were indicted state charges for murder. But I wasn't sure what the baby's name was. And since he was the victim, I wanted to give him, the honor of having at least his name said correctly. So his name is Nicholas Damasia. I think that's right. Dominci. Dominici, maybe. Nicholas Dominici. Only 1-year-old. And we also know the other victims were an unnamed 8-month-old girl, and then 2 other children, a 2-year-old and a child that we don't know how old they were, but all preschool age, all very young, all being taken care of. A woman, Mendez, I believe her name was Gray. Seems like maybe she and her husband and his cousin started a daycare as a front for their fentanyl pill business. Anyway, I wanted to make sure Nicholas's name was said. All right, tonight we are still talking about Ruby Franke and crazy Jody Hillebrand. And maybe I shouldn't give crazy because that makes it sound like that's an excuse for her. So, Hidden True Crime, Dr. John and Lauren Matthias. Dr. John Matthias is a psychologist who works forensically. I have a background in educational psychology, which is apparently the same as as Jody Hillebrand. Only I don't know how Jody Hillebrand got qualified in Utah with a ed psych degree, which is more about like child development stuff. It's not therapy. It's not mental health. So I don't know how she was a mental health advocate unless it was just something that Utah can do through the church. But they said she had an ed psych degree, which ed psych is about cognition, learning related, motivation related. But, and parenting is part of it, leadership, but it is not therapeutic. That is a whole other degree with a whole other licensure. So it's kind of strange. Anyways, it's embarrassing that I have that background that she has. But John Matthias is a forensic psychologist, does study criminals. He was talking about, and Lauren was talking about a book they got by Jody Hillebrand. She had written a book about her life, apparently. Oh, you guys, it is so, it's really pitiful. And I hate to say that because this is the thing. Grown-up monsters were once children and usually hurt children. And if you watch the New York Housewives or any of those housewife shows, their little catchphrases, hurt people, hurt people. But, within every catchphrase, there is some truth to it. Jodi Hillebrand apparently was SA'd. I mean, this is her saying it, but this is way before this in a book, as a child by an older teen relative, like repeatedly. And she said, and this is maybe how she developed her theory, was she just like took control of that thought and she just put it, like she just forgot. She made herself forget about it. Her dad was a military leader, very strict. Her mom, she was the baby, I guess, of a number of children, and her mom had lost what would have been another baby, and I guess was very despondent and just became closed off and non-responsive. And we know that emotionally neglectful people are horrible too. So, it actually made me feel sorry for her and kind of sympathetic to a woman who, especially if she has any alternative sexual identity feelings, herself, and she was growing up in a very strict environment. She didn't feel loved already. So to come out would have been horrible. There were some things her niece said that indicated perhaps she felt some kind of way, which is fine, but it wouldn't have been fine for her in that environment at that time with her family, apparently. And so you can see where someone who believes like the answer is to shut off all your feelings and control, and it's all you, and just punish yourself enough and cause yourself enough pain, and you can change your basic core beliefs, maybe who you love. You can, it doesn't explain and it does not excuse, but it can help us understand what not to do to small children. If you do have a family dynamic and you grew up being treated very strictly, or you have very conservative values, it is important to remember to always love and accept your children, even if they express things that you might not agree with, and to show love towards them, because otherwise you create monsters. I think there was something about serial killers that all their mothers were super controlling, and not all of them, but this was like a large amount of them, very controlling, very anti like men, and very degrading to their sons. I think that was true of like Charles Manson's mother and Ted Bundy, and who was the really huge guy. He was the character was played in Criminal Minds. He was like quiet, but he did horrible things, including his mother in the end. So mothers have a very, unfortunately, it's like a very responsible role, especially if they're a stay-at-home mom like Ruby. So, and Jodi does have children. We don't hear anything about Jodi. She's divorced, but she did have 2 kids. I would love to hear from them. But anyway, what was not the big news, besides the hidden true crime? Also, Kurt Hoda does a podcast called Psychology in Seattle, I believe. And he does a lot of response videos to like 90 Day Fiance and other things. But he's been following like these type of cases too. And this is one of the only times where I heard him swear. I think it's on part 4 of the Ruby Jodi Hillebrand case, part 4. I'd look it up. And he's very seeing both sides of things. He's a real therapist, a real psychologist, but he just lost it because he's like, these people were so hateful and cruel. And he brought up that like the Duggar family's use of is it IPT, which is a very high demand, high control parenting style, that quiverful movement, that he said it reminded him also of, there was this book, which I was not aware of, and please don't go order it, but I did see it on Amazon, and it was called To Train Up a Child. And the reason he brought it up was because he was reviewing what Jesse Hildebrandt had said about Jodi making her sleep out in the cold. It also reminded me of Duty Ron. There was a parent who 2 of the sons, one of them died from sleeping outside in New Jersey, I believe, or New York, in a garage in the winter. Well, he said in this book, keeping children cold, hosing them down in the wintertime, making them stay outside until they were freezing, that using painful techniques, that's how you train up a child. So, and I looked up the book. It was by Debbie and Mike. What was their last name? They aren't Mormon. They are not Mormons. They do identify as conservative evangelicals. Again, very high control. This is like the Duggar movement. These fundamentalist movements that don't allow children any choice, any development of self. Like it's, you are bad, you are born sinful, and you must have this beaten out of you. So I would go listen to that podcast too. That was kind of interesting. I'm sort of seeing these connections being drawn. So it's not like we're saying Mormons are bad, or we're saying that religion itself is bad. It is that there is this high control, high demand aspect, and the parenting in these groups, cults, tend to be very dismissive of self-esteem, all the things that make a healthy person. So Jody Hillebrand definitely falls within this, and what Ruby and Kevin were doing prior to, we think, 3 years ago, that when she met Jody Hillebrand. So the other big news was Kevin, Ruby's lawyer, is speaking for Kevin. And Kevin's not speaking, I think, because, and put it in the comments what you think, but I think he's not speaking because he doesn't want to be, he'll say something, it'll slip out, and he can't piss off Ruby because she will never see him again. And that's why he was doing all that crazy stuff. And his lawyer sort of admits, he's like, well, Ruby told him he couldn't see his kids. And Ruby said, and she said this because Jody said. And so Kevin's excuse is, I was just following orders. Basically, I can't think for myself. If I ever want my wife back, I can't say anything against her or Jody. But, the lawyer's like, oh, they were all brainwashed. Kevin was brainwashed. Ruby was brainwashed. So they're going to throw Jody completely under the bus. And I think Jody Hillebrand definitely has a lot of responsibility, at least half. But Ruby Franke and Kevin Franke are also grown-ups, and they had responsibilities. And we know prior to ever meeting Jody Hillebrand, they were doing things that aren't that far off. And as far as we know, maybe very similar to what Jody Hillebrand was suggesting as well. So while I think Jody Hillebrand, there's this like perfect storm, it is frightening to think that she did this to her niece in 2005. She has worked with many couples. His lawyer said he was in a group, it was mostly Zoom group, he said, where she basically, Jody Hillebrand, ran these mental health. He kept calling her a mental health provider, as if that excused his client from not seeing his kids for a year. And I want anybody out there to tell me, no matter who said what, would you really not see your kids? Even if your spouse said, well, then it's to help with the family. Wouldn't you be like, okay, well, here's the deal. I want to see them, even if it's at a park. I need to see them once a month. You don't, it sounds like he shouldn't get these kids back because he can't raise children, because he can't do anything without being told what to do, is what it sounds like to me. So his lawyer's claiming he wants those kids back, and that he was, the lawyer is blaming everybody else. Kevin really wants to talk. Kevin wants to tell a story. There are many chapters to his book. Oh, but he can't see anything right now. But then he kind of said, it sounded like he intimated that he believes what Ruby said about their kids. And by the way, it can only be the 12-year-old they're talking about. I'm not going to mention his name because he's a minor, but that would mean that the 10-year-old little girl, they said, was awesome, that he did this to, that she started doing it to other people. And let me just tell you, this sounds a lot like projection from Jody Hillebrand, maybe, because she was harmed, and then, I don't know, she harms people now. Is that what's happening? It is all so discombobulated, but personally, I believe, my feelings, my opinion is that none of those people should be around these kids, that these kids need to be with healthy foster families that are normal, that can take them to a therapist, a real one, to get their self-esteem and a sense of self developed. They still have some time. They're going to need a lot of help. And if anybody out there has been infected by these people, by Jodi Hillebrand, people like her. If anybody's told you you have something wrong inside of you that you know, and we all have things wrong with us. Every single one of us are not totally healthy. And our parents have all made mistakes. I, as a parent, have made mistakes. Nobody is perfect. But the fact that, but I've never taken a powder for 13 months and stayed away from my kids. Well, because I was told. If that's how you respond to your spouse, you don't have the fortitude to raise children, especially children who have been hurt, especially when we know that you have been on TV agreeing with your wife, saying, no, I think this is great. Like, you should sleep on the ground. You don't need a lot of food, blah, blah, blah. That's like that, how to raise up. I would not be surprised if they read how to raise up or how to train a child or how to raise up and train your child, whatever that horrific book was. All right, enough of those people. We'll hear more for them. The next court date is October, is it 17th? There's a scheduled hearing day, and there's a schedule for the custody, which they call a shelter hearing, and then there's a Ruby Jodi. Anyways, okay, case number 2. I just was reading about this case, and then Gisela K came out today with a thumbnail saying she was going to cover it, which is there was a family of 4 in a, I swear, people love to just run their cars so fast. There was a family of 4 in Chicago, in a suburb of Chicago, a slightly southwest of the main part of the city. It's called it looks to me like Romeoville, but it sounded like when the law enforcement was saying, they said Romeville, Illinois. These were 2 parents in their early 30s, 2 children, 7 and 9, 3 dogs, and they were all unalived with shots sometime between Saturday night, September 16th, and Sunday, September 17th. That morning, I believe Sunday morning, the father, Alberto, was supposed to go to work and did not show up. And then by that night, Sunday night, either his family and they're not saying it's his wife or not. They have different last names, but a lot of people do. Zurda, the mom, nobody had heard from either one of them. They were trying to text them, call them. It sounds like the models out in LA, right? People start getting worried. And so they called the police to do a wellness check. Zurda was 32 and Alberto was 38. And then their sons, 7 and 9. And what the police found were unalived everybody. They're not saying where they were found or how they were found, but that they were all shot. They did say that they weren't worried about the community and they weren't telling anybody to shelter in place. Then that was yesterday. And then by Tuesday, they were saying, or maybe it was this morning on Wednesday, they were saying there's a nexus that they found between this person of interest. So they had a person of interest, they admitted this morning, and the family. So they had an idea. Then just a couple hours later in the afternoon, while I was watching Gisela K on Grizzly 2 Crime, they had a live. She found it. She got it up. And they had found the guy. So they said Nicholas Hurley, is that his name? Let me just get this straight. That's my little, got to get something straight. All right. I'm sorry, Nathaniel Huey. Okay, or Nicholas Hurley or Nathaniel Huey. Can you tell I'm the dyslexic detective? Close, but no cigar. that was the individual, and they didn't say this until this was all over. So what they came out and said was, this person of interest, Nathaniel Huey Jr., his car, and he was from a nearby town, which was Steamboat, Illinois, as was a unidentified at first woman who was considered endangered. But she's 50 years old, which is kind of interesting. But when they showed her picture, I mean, she is strikingly good looking. They saw his car in, I'm not going to say this right, Cartusa, Oklahoma. So I don't know if you guys remember that there was a man from Ohio that ran away with an endangered teenage girl. She was 17. His mom was found dead. They found his mom's car through the same process, which is license plate reading. So if you're in a car and you go through any major city at all, and or even on the outskirts, it will read your license plate. And if they're looking for you, it's automated. They can flag it and find out exactly where you are. So they flagged his car. He was 650 miles away from Chicagoland, where the crime occurred. Officers just put on the lights like they were doing a traffic stop, but the car took off. And if you remember, it's kind of like a Vicky and what was the other guy? The jailbird guy, White, who she helped break out of jail. It was kind of like that kind of situation where all of a sudden, as soon as they see the cops, it's like jig is up. We're gonna go as fast as we can. So there was a car speed chased. The car then crashed. The car then began to burn, and as they approached, this is just like Vicky White's case, they heard 2 shots. Only in that case, Vicky was found unalived in the car, and the convict just went back to jail. In this case, Casey White, that's what his name was. In this case, the woman was found in the passenger seat. She was shot, but still alive, critically injured. So let's hope she makes it through the night. And then he unalived himself like a coward. So something at the home, the officers did say then that they had found a connection between this man and the family and a reason why. So was he a stalker, or did he know the husband? Was there a problem? They reported that the family had a 2019 bankruptcy. Now, it was reported it was for $26,000 of school loans, but I didn't think loans were forgivable in a bankruptcy for some reason, unless there's a special chapter or something that you can get that cleared off. Or maybe they just meant they had that much debt, and so they had to declare bankruptcy for everything else because they had crushing educational debt. The family actually came here from Puerto Rico, which doesn't make them immigrants because Puerto Rico is a territory of the U.S. So they've always been U.S. citizens, but they did make a big, change of life to come to Illinois. And I don't know if that's where they went to school, but this was their first real house. They'd only lived there since April. And if you Google the address and just drive down Google, on the Google view, Street View, you can see the picture taken at the time. On the door, it says like life blooms here, or happiness, something about life and happiness blooming here for spring. So they had just moved in April. We don't know what the connection is, but we'll probably hear more about it tomorrow. So let's hope the lady with him survives. I don't know if she was endangered because he kidnapped her. We don't know anything about her except she's 50 years old and she's in critical condition from being shot. All right. Case number 3. Better hurry up. Running out of time. Ashley Benfield. If you remember Ashley Benfield, I think I may have done a review of this case, but if not, I think Stephanie Harlow has done this case. It was a well talked about case. She was a 24-year-old girl who hooked a guy whose wife had just passed away. He was a Navy vet and he was in his 50s, and his teenage daughter has come out, and she had a lot to say because It's such a long story, you guys. I should probably do this case justice before her trial starts, but she had shot him in Florida and tried to claim, oh my gosh, he's a DV person. He tried to do this to me before. He tried to do that. When there was another side of the story that looked like this woman just basically wanted to get married, have a baby, and then move away and get the child support, but she had no interest in the guy, and he was not giving up. And it sounded like, and he had a lot of money and he was able to fight her legally. He wanted to see his baby, and she kept, like, when she gave birth, she didn't tell him the baby was born. She was a little sketch about everything, in my opinion, allegedly. Anyway, she was trying to get use Florida's stand your ground law. Now, she invited him there to help her move. She was moving supposedly to Maryland with the baby, and so was her mom, to be closer to him. He was going to move to the same area. Did not work out. So look up the name Ashley Benefield, Benefield, and Doug Benefield. His daughter has done a number of interviews with true crime people, and the true crime big names have done stories on this case. So she was denied that. She wanted the charges to be dismissed. That was denied. She can still use that as an excuse, like a defense in court, but the charges were not dismissed. So that is still going forward. And the very last case we have, case number 4, is, more stuff is coming out about the Delphi case and the Odinist stuff. And what's very interesting is, I had no idea, but there are Odinist white nationalists have basically revived the Odinist traditions of, like, the Vikings, just like the Nazis did. Isn't that interesting? So there are known factions in Indiana, Sons of Odin. They're known. The 3 of the 4 names in the 136 page filing by the defense. Sorry, there are 5 names. 3 or 4 of them are named in an article in 2017 about white nationalists and Odinists, which is kind of weird. So that is where the defense is getting this from. These people are involved in this religion, and it's really scary because when they are known to have made sacrifices, they did do it in the woods, like long, long ago, even in clearings and glens near water. And if you remember, Deer Creek was right by the Monon High Bridge, ran right underneath it. So the whole, I can't even, the traditions, there is even a tradition that took place in February in the Odinism calendar, but there was like 9, that splits up into seasonal things. But the way they said the girls were posed, if you look at the tarot cards, there's one called the Hanged Man, because they said one of the girls was posed with her leg underneath the other leg at a bent angle, and there were like sticks or something around her head. It looks just like the Hanged Man card. And then, so I went ahead and Googled Hanged Man and tarot cards related to Odinism, Norse religion. Oh, it's the card that represents Odin. So just reading a little bit more about so there's a tradition in the Norse tradition way back with Vikings. I'm not saying this probably right, but it was blots, BLO with that little accent, TS, blots, which are a ceremony. in this Norse religion. And they used sticks. And part of it is once you bleed out whatever is sacrificed, not only do you all drink the blood, but and this could be like there could be like reenactments with the animals, or maybe just with alcohol, like for normal people who would practice this, people who would be, in what I'm going to say is not Odinists, if they were practicing it like ancient, would not be violent per se, but the white nationalists who have taken over this tradition might be more likely to be this. But in the olden tradition, they would take twigs and things, they would dip it in the blood, and then they would cast it around. Well, there was blood splatter found on the girls, and I believe around on the trees and stuff. Besides, there was writing on the trees in one of the girls' bloods, and one of the girls was bled out, and they couldn't find. She was clean, dressed in. It was Abby dressed in the other girl. Abby was dressed in Libby's clothes. She had been cut across her neck, but there was no sign of where her blood was. And she was clean, except for the big gash in her throat. And in the olden times, this is gross, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to say trigger wording. In the olden days, the Vikings were said to have liked the arterial spray from when then they would drink that and they would sprinkle it around. And so, you guys, it is very frightening, but that description of the crime scene dovetails with what those ceremonies would have been like. And they didn't find her blood anywhere. And in the old-fashioned days, whatever, the 800s, the Vikings, they would have kept some of the blood for like ceremonies later. So I'm not saying they did it. This is all allegedly, this is all allegations and shade, but this is what the document, that 106 document. Now, they didn't use the word blots. They didn't describe the Hanged Man tarot card, but go look it up and let me know what you think. Hey, you can like and subscribe and tell me if you think I went down a rabbit hole and got all crazy, but I don't know. I retweeted it to Peter Tragos, who was talking about like the Odin religion claims and had read through the document, and I tweeted it at Gizla K at Grizzly True Crime, because she also was talking about this. And at first, when people were reading this, they're like, Odinism, Vikings, what? Ruins. And it's Runes. If you look at Tolkien, like I said before, you would understand what they look like. But you guys, these people, the white nationalist groups, some of them have usurped this old tradition and have taken it over. And the crime scene does match what a very old savage blot would have been. So it's scary. The other thing I wanted to remind you guys of, do you remember the couple in Florence, Kentucky, who back in, was it May of this year, they said that the detective there, I forget, what is his name, Cox, he said that it was an elderly couple that was killed in their condo, but the person there had also put things on and around posed bodies. And he thought there was a connection with Delphi's case. So one of the things I think was mentioned back then, they said maybe they were thinking jewelry or something from the one home maybe had shown up in Delphi. We never heard about that. But I will tell you, guess what? There's a Norse tradition of using jewelry like that in a ceremony. So again, this, we can make the puzzle pieces fit, and that is a cognitive bias, a way to do that, where the brain wants to see a pattern to fit something that you already think, a confirmation bias. And that it may be likely what I'm doing, but I mean, didn't control Peggy and Bill Stephenson, who were killed. They were killed May 29th, 2011. And the reason I thought about it was because a lot of people are saying, yeah, so if this was a ritualistic murder, why aren't we seeing more of these? Oh, the ritualistic murders in old fashioned times of Odinism were done every 9 years, an actual human sacrifice. Now, this was 6 years in between, but flip around 9 and 6. I don't know, but I would like to know if the Florence, Kentucky paired killings included any runes, any twigs, if it had any Odinistic symbology. That would really be interesting. I was also trying to look up those 5 names of those people, which I'm not going to say here. You can find them in the article, in the filing. But I was trying to see if any of them were truck drivers, because if you remember, in May, when they talked about the similarities between the cases, they were saying they thought maybe it was a truck driver because Bill had run a chapel for people out of the truck area. So I don't know if any of them are truck drivers. I do know that if you take the towns that those men named that were Odinists in the filing, where they're from, and you look at Delphi and then you look at Florence, Kentucky, they're centrally located between Delphi, about an hour and a half away from Delphi and almost 2 hours away from Florence, Kentucky. So it's kind of interesting that if the murders are similarly, now we don't know why the detective thought they were similar, except for the idea that things were on the bodies and around the bodies. So just interesting to me. Also, one of the bodies was cut post-mortem about 2 hours. We don't know where, we don't know what that means, but was there any bloodletting? Sorry, I'm getting a little graphic, but it is interesting to me how those two things might be connected. All right, so what do you think? Let me know. I'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday. And so in between now and then, please watch your back, lock your doors, don't go walking in the woods alone. Enjoy your night. All right, bye.